Hey, ladies and gents, welcome to the Controlled Interest Gamecast, where we talk about video games and everything happening in the industry. As always, I'm joined by Jordan.
Greetings, Jared. It is such a pleasure to have you here, I must say, and may the force be with you.
May the force be with me, and Dom.
Praise the sun.
If you praise the sun and you have the force by your side, I think you're pretty undefeatable at that point.
If only I could be so grossly incandescent.
Man, I just thought of Solaire rocking like a yellow lightsaber. It'd be dope. You guys obviously know a lot more about Star Wars than I do. Has there ever been, I know probably Legends, but in canon, has there been somebody rocking a yellow lightsaber?
Yeah, the Jedi Temple Guards.
Oh, cool.
Yep. It's cool
Or,
shit.
because the only ones I know of from the movies are obviously purple, red, blue, green.
Yeah.
I think that's it. And then obviously
Yeah, I don't think there has been an on-screen orange lightsaber. I think that has only been in video games.
Oh, okay.
And then... Are those all the primary colors? Do we go through all the primary colors?
That's what I'm excited for with Jedi Fallen Order. The rumors and the previews talking about lightsaber customization is that you might get to pick your own colored kyber crystal.
There's technically, I guess you could say, another color, which makes an on-screen appearance, and that is white.
White.
How-
It's not. It's in Star Wars Rebels with Ahsoka's lightsabers.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, basically she has to purify the crystal, and that turns it white. The kyber crystal.
Interesting. Yeah.
You know?
Is she?
They talk about in her novel about how like the reason that Sith people have red lightsabers is because they go through this process of bleeding the kyber crystal. That's what turns it red. Also, as far as orange, I would say you shouldn't have asked me about Star Wars, Jared. That was a bad choice. I would say about the orange, I would actually consider Kylo Ren's lightsaber orange. More orange than red for me.
It's like a not passion fruit, like a blood orange. Blood orange.
Right. Yeah. like a blood orange, yes. Grapefruit, like a grapefruit, yes.
That was our lightsaber discussion for the beginning of the podcast. Always riveting. I love lightsabers.
Well, before we finish, real quick, what color is your lightsaber, generally?
You're asking which, like, what if we could choose?
Yeah, and I guess, what are you going to be generally rocking once you boot up Jedi Fallen Order?
So, my favorite colors are purple, orange, and gray, right? Orange depends on like what kind of orange I could rock. Purple kind of is... It was kind of ruined by the whole Mace Windu, I wanted a purple lightsaber, I asked for one, so they gave it to me kind of thing. But I still might rock a purple lightsaber. And gray, I don't think just would be interesting enough. Like, because in this idea, I'm a Jedi myself, and I wouldn't really be...
Sure.
I'd be a Jedi, not a Sith, so gray wouldn't really make sense. So I guess like a purple, like a vibrant purple. A little bit brighter than Mace Windu's.
I would go baby blue.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So, I would be purple for sure, and then probably green would be my secondary choice. But I would also really love just going with the white lightsaber, because I think I would be a gray Jedi, which I won't go into the whole lore about that, but I think that would, which is like why Ahsoka has the white lightsabers, is because she's a gray Jedi. So, yeah, I think that'd be cool.
Cerulean would be nice, like a bluish greenish kind of. That'd be pretty dope too.
Cerulean.
Cerulean City. In terms of what we've been playing, Outer Worlds. So, did you get a chance to play some this week, Dom?
Yeah, a little bit. A couple hours. I'm still in that first town, but yeah, got in there.
Real interested to hear the thoughts this week.
So for those listening, we're recording earlier than usual. So instead of recording on Thursdays, we're recording on Wednesdays. So that's why we might have less on our plate in terms of what we've experienced this week. For the Outer Worlds,
before you jump in, I just want to say about Outer Worlds, you guys might feel this with other games, but this is a game for me that I am not interested in playing, but I'm very interested to see how this game turned out.
Yeah, I get that way sometimes too. It's like it's not necessarily something you want to experience yourself, but everything surrounding the game and the type of game it is itself, you're kind of interested in all the things
Right.
going on. Yeah. So I've played about 7 hours, I think, in total now. I've left that initial planet, the one where you're at now, Dom, with Edgewater and all that. And this isn't a spoiler. When you get to the end of that first area, there's a decision you have to make one way or another, and that dictates things that happen on that planet. And then you're able to leave that planet and go to different destinations. Obviously, that's called the Outer World, so you can go to all these different planets. And it seems like you can tackle them not necessarily in any order you want, but there's a couple of options you have between a couple of spaceships and another planet you can go down to. The decision making in this game is really cool. Continues to be, very much inspired by Fallout and Western RPGs. The decision you make at the end that dictates how things change drastically changes that area in major ways, and it's one of the first times in these type of games where I genuinely had a hard time making the decision one way or another of what to choose. Normally it's like there's an obvious choice you can make, or there's the rebellious choice, right? And it's kind of pretty evident of like, oh, what kind of player do you want to be in this game? I would say for this, that first decision doesn't necessarily have a right or wrong answer. And some of the characters provide really good arguments as to why you should choose one way or another. And I talked about last week how this game has great writing. The first couple of companions I've picked up, because on this first planet area, I was able to pick up 2 companions. I think there's a total of 6 or 7 in the game. And I don't know if I missed somebody on that initial area. But they're super well written. They're very diverse. Their backstories are really interesting. I like that sometimes in these games you can just go out of your way to talk to the companion and find out their whole backstory, yada, 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 and then get their side quest, do their side quest, and then you're kind of done with that character. Like, you can still interact with them, but the depth there kind of goes away through those initial reactions, right? You get it all out of the way in like 10, 15 minutes, and then you're good with that character, and you either build a relationship then and there, or you never really build that relationship. With this game, it kind of unfolds slowly, where you'll be walking through areas and your companion will mention something based on the area you guys are in or the people that you're interacting with, and they'll make a comment, right? You'll hear it in the background, and afterwards you can go up to them and be like, hey, I have a question regarding something you said back there. So it kind of triggers based on certain areas you take them to, and they're not always mandatory places or mandatory characters you need to talk with. So there's a lot of missable stuff there. Another thing I didn't mention last week that I noticed playing for an extended period of time since then is this game does a really good job of rewarding exploration despite it not having the scale that Fallout games do, right? It's a much smaller scale game. The area for this first planet isn't very large, but there still are little nooks and crannies that if you explore, you're rewarded with some really cool items. So, yeah.
I'd say, we've already said a lot, and I don't have too much new, especially after what you just added. But I would say the combat, the shooting, is a little bit better than I had anticipated, and I guess that makes sense. It is still a newer game, even though it's smaller scale. I think that mostly applies to like scope. Like the literal size of the worlds, right? As far as I can tell, because the mechanics, I don't know, they're a little bit tighter than I thought. I think they're on par with Fallout 4, like you said, Jerrad, but the difference being that in Fallout 4, the shooting kind of sucks ass intentionally. I mean, especially early on, because all your guns are literally like duct taped together pipe guns, right? Yeah. So of course, they have a lot of kick and they don't aim that well, but it always feels like that's how it's supposed to be. Like, it wouldn't, right? Whereas in the Outer Worlds, you're in the future, you're in space, so your guns should be a little bit more Call of Duty-esque, and where it's unrealistically low recoil, that kind of thing. But it feels good, and it all makes sense. So I was pleasantly surprised. The combat feels better than I anticipated, especially when everything else feels like a direct sequel to New Vegas, which is, horrendously, it's just old. So the combat is super dated in that game. So I kind of for some reason I was expecting that, but it feels much better. So
yeah, it exceeds that, and it still has that excellent writing, right? Because when New Vegas, you're right, the combat is super dated, but that writing's still there. It's still a great experience.
So the combat, I have been wondering recently, it seems like with Fallout games and between Bethesda and Obsidian doing Fallout 3 and New Vegas, it seems like they obviously had the RPG elements down and the world building, all of that, but people have major complaints about the shooting there, and it seems like, obviously, Dom, you don't hate it, but it still seems like it's not up to par with something like Borderlands, for example, right? My question is, people can do it. People can make these big games, The Division or Destiny, these big open world games with quality shooting mechanics. Why don't these games do it? Why isn't Bethesda doing it? Or why isn't Obsidian doing it here? I get why the faces don't look as good as The Division. The budget's not there, right? But I don't necessarily see budget equating to how good your shooting mechanics are. So I'm just wondering why they haven't been able to figure it out when clearly other people have.
I think in this case, it's probably a little bit... It's impacted by the budget, but in the case of Fallout 4, they could have made the shooting way better.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is
but
that makes sense for this game, but for the Bethesda Studios games, it's why are their Fallout games still shitty about shooting? It can't be that fucking mind-boggling. There's plenty of studios making great first-person shooters.
I think it's purely intentional. That's the game design.
I think it's focused on different areas, in my opinion. Especially with Obsidian, I think that their focus was on writing and quest development and that stuff, and not necessarily on the shooting mechanics. Because to your point, with Borderlands, right? Borderlands has phenomenal shooting mechanics, but most people could care two shits about the story in that game, right? People often joke about the writing. Whereas with Obsidian, and especially the Outer Worlds, no one's going to question the writing in the game, but one of its biggest weaknesses is, the combat's good, but it's subpar.
That's what I'm saying.
Is
no one's questioning the writing, so why would you dump all your budget into that? Why wouldn't you try to fix that shooting? Why wouldn't you make that more of a focus for your game development?
I don't think it's broken though. I
don't think it's broken. I think it's better. I think the worst case scenario in all of the games you kind of mentioned, I think, are the Elder Scrolls games, because their magic casting stuff isn't bad. Their melee combat is pretty poor, right? It's pretty poor, with the sword fighting and hammers and all of that stuff. With Fallout, I think the melee combat is, I think, a little bit better than Elder Scrolls maybe, and their shooting is obviously not very good in comparison to most modern shooters. I just think it's, from a game director perspective, you put focuses on things, and I think when you're trying to deliver a certain type of project, they put, they have 10 eggs, they're going to put 8 eggs in the RPG world building, writing, character development, and they're going to put 2 eggs in the shooting, because they know that their project is focusing on one side as opposed to the other, and they're not necessarily broken. They're obviously playable. It's just deciding where you want to put your focus on, because I'd much rather have an Outer Worlds game with 10 out of 10 writing and world development and characters, and a 7.58 shooting, than for them to go, okay, let's focus on making the shooting better. We get a 9 shooting, but then the story, world building, all that stuff falls off just a little bit, even at that.
That all makes sense for this game, The Outer Worlds, but it still kind of boggles my mind looking at Bethesda Game Studios.
Witcher 3 was a kick in the mouth. Witcher 3 was a kick in the mouth.
Not enough, because Fallout 4 came out after that.
Well, it was in development. You know what I mean? It didn't come out much after that.
Sure.
But I think that was a kick in the teeth in terms of them seeing where the bar is. And I do think so. Obviously, things don't happen in a vacuum. In a world where Witcher 3 never came out, okay? Because Witcher 3 was such a phenomenon when it released in terms of Western RPGs. Well, feeling like a Western RPG, obviously, was developed in Europe. Still technically Western, but...
Europe's the West.
Yeah. So, if that game never released, I think we probably would have gotten Elder Scrolls or Starfield sooner than we have. But I genuinely believe that when that game released, Bethesda realized, and obviously I'm talking about a section of it because you can talk about, oh, but they released Fallout 76 and that was broken, yada, yada. I'm talking about like big picture. Yeah. I think they saw like, oh, if we release these games how we have been, where incremental upgrades, but people still love our systems and stuff, it's not going to be enough anymore, right? And I do think, I mean, Starfield and Elder Scrolls 6 will still release buggy. That's just the way it is, and the way that Elder Scrolls Bethesda approaches their game development. But I do think that they have to hit a new quality threshold. Like the bottom bar that you can achieve with, like you said, combat and stuff has lifted to a point where there will be an unacceptable level. Whether that.
So do you think that? Sorry, do you think that if Starfield has shooting mechanics to the extent of Outer Worlds, let's say, will it be anywhere near the realm of Borderlands quality shooting?
No, I just don't think that's what those games go for. Yeah, I would never buy a Bethesda game hoping for it to have the shooting mechanics of Borderlands.
Yeah, I don't.
But you got to realize that whether or not that's why you guys are buying the game, why you enjoy the game, why people are into the games, it is nonetheless a major aspect of the game, so much so that you're doing it probably most of the time. I would say you're probably doing that 60% of the time, and then maybe, talking to people selling items 40% of the time. So it's like, if that's that big of a chunk of your game, whether or not you guys think, like, would you not be ecstatic to get a Bethesda game or an Obsidian game that's like Fallout, essentially, that has the great RPG aspects and story that you've come to know and love from those series, but then also has shooting mechanics that can near rival Borderlands, for example?
I don't think so. So I think we're conflating.
You wouldn't be ecstatic for that.
No, I mean,
it has everything else that you love about it, right? They nailed that, but then it also has way awesome shooting mechanics, which you're doing a lot of.
Right, so that's what I'm saying is, like, the way you worded that, yes, I would, but to me that's what it already is. Like, to me, I love the shooting mechanics in Fallout games. Like, it's already good. Just because it's not fast and, like, hyper speed and perfectly accurate, like, to me that's not what makes it something good. I think that's a progression, just like, a turn-based RPG game, that's all there used to be, right? And eventually we got, like, live action type, not live action, but, non-timed games, right? That's one a progression of a game system, but we still have turn-based RPGs, right? Like, that style of gameplay is still good. It didn't go away, and I think it's still valued. And I think that's the same thing, like in Fallout games, the combat is deliberately, it also happens to cost less, yeah, so they can put more budget in other places probably, but it still is deliberate in its design choices, I think. Like, there's not that many enemies on screen, and it's a little more strategic. To me, like, that is good. That's what I want, and it's a little janky, but that's always been the point of it. That's always, like, that's what I do want out of it. I don't want a fast-paced Borderlands type gunplay in my Fallout game. That I wouldn't want that. I mean, unless, then it would be a different thing.
Well, then that changes the entire game design of the game.
Yeah, I'm not talking, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about altering the way in which you interact with it, or the way in which you go about shooting, for example. I'm talking about changing the quality of, I mean, it's hard to describe. It's very kind of a minutiae thing, but, like, just the quality of the gameplay generally when it comes to combat. I think it sounds to me, Dom, like you're saying it doesn't necessarily need to be improved, but I think we can all agree that the general sentiment when it comes to Bethesda games and the Obsidian games when it comes to Fallout New Vegas and Outer Worlds, I think we can all agree the sentiment generally is that the combat needs improvement or could be much improved.
I think, couldn't.
Maybe.
I think it's more of a. I just think it's more of a could be argument as opposed to should be, because I think most people are going to buy. I mean, if it reviews well, I'm not talking about Fallout 76, but if Starfield or Elder Scrolls 6 comes out and it improves all of the stuff that Skyrim did well or Fallout did well, and it improves all of that, and the shooting is still subpar to meh, I still think people are going to run out to buy the game because that's not what they're looking for. And like with Borderlands, right? So Borderlands has excellent shooting. It doesn't have a lot of the other elements that I'd want in a game, so I passed on it. I didn't purchase it. Whereas with like the Outer
Right.
Worlds or even Fallout 4, at launch, I knew that those games weren't going to have top end shooting mechanics. That's not what I necessarily went in for, and I bought the game, and I'm
Right.
fine with that, right? So it's like,
But see,
I
that's how you go from a Fallout 4 situation where the game sold well, people, generally the Metacritic's solid and all that. It's not a Fallout 76 by any stretch of the imagination. That's how you go from a Fallout 4 to a Red Dead 2 or something that's more of a masterpiece level, right? Where you sell bajillions of copies, right? Like that gets, so if the shooting sucks in Starfield, you guys will probably still buy it because you love Bethesda games and that style, right? But it's not going to hook people like me or other people that may have been on the fence but really need solid gameplay in their RPGs, right? And that, I think, if it's fine if Bethesda, and it seems like they are, both Bethesda, I think Obsidian is more a conversation of financials, but Bethesda seems to be like not necessarily concerned about cleaning up the bugs or cleaning up the combat. So if they want to be an 8.5 as opposed to a 9 or a 10, that's up to them. But I think that it pays off when you go the extra mile. You can't be a masterpiece when one major part of your movie, game, whatever is sorely lacking, right? So I think that's just the little gray area that bumps you from one level to the other.
Yeah, the tough thing though, like, so GTA 5 didn't really improve on the shooting mechanics of GTA 4. Still arguably one of the best-selling games of all time, right? It's still a glaring
it's still
thing.
Probably better than the shooting mechanics in Bethesda games.
I would maybe not strongly disagree, but like they're not great. And then with Red Dead 2, right? Red Dead 2 comes out and it still has a lot of the control issues people faced with the first Red Dead. And that was a glaring issue that people had with that game. Not necessarily for me. Like, I enjoyed that game, and I didn't think the controls were that big of a detriment, but you go online and you read almost any review of Red Dead 2, and they're going to talk about how bad the controls are.
Well, I think when people are talking about the controls, they're talking about, like, how, like, weapon swapping and how you can accidentally shoot people in the face when you're trying to say hello in the middle of a town, like, stuff like that, as opposed to...
Your horse tripping on a rock.
Yeah, like, as opposed to how well the actual gun mechanics are. Now, I will say, Red Dead that's the reason. It's the same thing as VATS. It's the reason they have what's the
crutch
mechanic?
Deadshot.
Deadeye, yeah.
Deadeye.
That's why they have that, is because they need a crutch. Maybe Rockstar games aren't the best example here for me to use because they are also known to not kind of improve upon the stuff that people have been complaining about.
In many ways, they're the exception, not the rule. Like, for
right,
a lot of reasons.
That's the thing, is I think you can see that GTA and Red Dead 2 did better than Fallout 4. So
I just
Bethesda
feel like
doesn't quite have that luxury.
For shooting, I feel like everyone has conflated good with, tight and fast and frenetic. Like Doom 2016 and Call of Duty and Borderlands. As those are the best
that's not what
shooter
I'm talking
mechanics,
about.
right?
I'm talking about the tightness. It's all about the tightness.
Yeah, but I guess that's still part of it too for me. Is like, I don't know that that's necessarily good. That might be more fun in the most like literal, visceral sense, but that wouldn't make sense in a Fallout game. Certainly not in Red Dead, right? Like, it would never be fast. It would never be tight.
Wait, you're telling me it wouldn't make sense for me to point my rifle in Red Dead and for the bullet to actually go where the reticle is pointed, where my mind and the game is telling me it's supposed to go?
Correct.
I think that
Absolutely.
would much improvement.
No,
Why would you want a game where it's not like doing what you're asking it to do and what it's telling you it's going to do if you ask it to do that?
Because ultimately you're shooting an 1860s, or 1815 musket or whatever, so it's not going to be accurate, right? It's not going to go where you point it.
Sure, but I don't.
It's going to be clunky to reload and so on, right? You're not going to be able to just switch real fast and jump and yada yada.
Reload speed is one thing, but like if you're using a sniper rifle in those games, it's still not quite there. I don't think it's an artistic choice like that. I don't think that they are, Rockstar and Bethesda are making less than stellar shooting mechanics because they're trying to say, well, you're using, guns built from pieces found in the wasteland, or you're using guns from the 1860s. Like Jerrad said, the GTA shooting's shitty, and they're using modern weaponry. I think it's just a pure lack of quality, not an artistic choice.
But even then, I think like modern shooters, like futuristic ones or whatever, like it's hype. It's not realistic in any world, that isn't nonfiction, right? Like in GTA, yeah, you're using modern guns, but you're still just a dude on the streets. Like you're not a super soldier Captain America who can aim perfectly. Like in Call of Duty, like that's impossible. How quickly you can aim and do things and stuff. You know what I mean? That's just not possible for a human being.
Yeah, but like I said, you're kind of talking about artistic choice of like, oh, Trevor is not a sharpshooter, therefore that's why his gun isn't shooting as accurately as like someone in, like Ghost Recon, for example. And I think you're thinking deeper than the developers are on that situation, because I think it's just they're not putting their ability points into that column. It's kind of like what Naughty Dog tried to do about Drake. Like, oh, Drake doesn't get shot in the Uncharted games, he just runs out of luck. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? Yeah, when you die in Uncharted, he's just running out of luck. That's not him actually getting shot like 5 or 6 times and then finally dying.
Yeah,
it's like, no, dude, you don't need to. Trying to over-explain it, I think, is trying to kind of like help it out when it's not necessarily deserving.
I just think that with so many deadlines and everything, all the milestones that they have to hit with the publishers, I think that game developers have to pick and choose what things they focus on. For instance, Destiny, right? Destiny has some of the best shooting mechanics in all of video games. Their campaigns and all that stuff is like not very good at all. So the argument can be made, well, if you're trying to release this AAA game that's supposed to be the next sci-fi big franchise, why would you not focus on putting together an engaging story that actually has like a neat, interesting through line of a narrative, and you just piece together these missions that don't really feel like anything?
I would actually say, compared to Destiny 1, Destiny 2's campaign was a massive improvement. Now, Destiny 1's campaign was pretty fucking abysmal, so that's not saying too much, but I do think that they at least tried. I could certainly tell that they were trying, and there's also something to be said for the fact that the story was gutted kind of last minute for Destiny 1. But that's what I'm saying is, like, I'm not seeing them try here, and I get the argument for Obsidian up until this point. Now they're owned by Microsoft, but Bethesda Studios does just not have an excuse for me when it comes to, time or resources or whatever. I think they could probably figure it out. Obsidian, different story. But, like I said, until now. But, I see Bungie trying to make a better story. Even if it's not The Last of Us, they're trying. And I don't see Bethesda trying. But I'm not, like I said, this is the difference between you guys continuing to buy their games and them finding a new customer and someone like me. So if they're not trying to expand their business, then by all means, don't try harder. Don't try to make things better like Bungie was doing.
Also,
otherwise,
until Starfield and Elder Scrolls 6 comes out, we're going to have to sit and wait to see what exactly happens with them, because Fallout 76, the trash fire it was made on the Fallout 4 engine.
BGS game. And not a BGS game,
exactly.
Not a Bethesda Game Studios game. And as you accurately pointed out, Fallout 4, although they had the kick in the teeth of Witcher 3, it probably came too late for them to change course that late in the game's development.
Yeah, so Starfield and Elder Scrolls 6, we'll see where they lie on that, and maybe they will upgrade it to a point where they do grab a new audience like you, So we'll see. Sure. We went kind of long on that, so let's all try to be not super brief, but we've already half an hour into the podcast because of that lengthy discussion, but it's great. It's what we're here for. Talk about video games.
I think it's good for us to look at kind of benchmark titles and maybe dive a little bit deeper with Outer Worlds. I think, like I said, I'm not even playing it, and I think you can feel kind of the excitement in the industry for a game like this. So
yeah. So I mentioned Outer Worlds. The only other thing I wanted to mention, Call of Duty Modern Warfare. I've been playing some more of that. Haven't touched the campaign again this week, but played some more multiplayer. A lot of the maps I really am enjoying. One of the maps is arguably the worst Call of Duty map I've ever played in my history of Call of Duty.
Whoa.
It's awful. Remember last week I mentioned that Piccadilly mission at the beginning where it takes place in London and you're trying to save civilians from terrorists?
Yeah.
The map for that story mission, because there's always like, they have multiplayer maps that are tied to the campaign.
The equivalent.
It is awful. It's a tiny little square with like a fountain in the middle with some buses. The run lines and shoot lines are terrible in the map. The spawning is, and everyone always jokes like, oh, Call of Duty spawning sucks. It's so small and confined with such narrow passageways that it invites camping, and if somebody gets on a huge kill streak, the match is pretty much over. So it's like just not very fun to play either.
Damn.
Other than that, a lot of the other maps are super enjoyable, nice, a variety of size. So you can either decide to go and run and gun or maybe snipe on some maps. And I felt a good variety in that of I go into a multiplayer game. I'm like, oh, what map is this? I think I'm going to snipe this one, so I'm not stuck using the same classes over and over again.
How's the shooting in that game, Jerrad?
Is it it's phenomenal. Yeah, it's phenomenal. Yeah, it's better than the Outer Worlds. But you can't shoot a weird gorilla alien in it, so I don't know. It doesn't have the points that Outer Worlds has. That's pretty much it for me.
Totally different ballgame.
Outside of Outer Worlds, Dom, anything else you wanted to mention?
No, that's been it. It's not been too much this week, so.
Okay. Jordan, anything before we head into news? You want to tell us about you played?
Absolutely. Didn't actually play anything, Jerrad, so if you want to skip over anything else, that's fine with me.
No, you can go ahead and let us know what else you experienced.
Sure. So I finished the second season of Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex. Still a movie to be watched that goes along with that series, but that is the one that they're going to be continuing on Netflix in 2020. So, solid series. I think probably lower, on the scale, like I said, with my Ghost in the Shell ranking, but, the other stuff is pretty fucking special. So, it's got a lot of wordy, socio-political dialogue that gets a little bit bogged down with dialogue, but it's still cool Ghost in the Shell cyberpunk shit. So, there's that. Some comics I read. Huge shout out to Deceased. Jerrad, have you thought about reading Deceased?
I'm currently reading it. I haven't read 6 that came out today, but yeah, I've been reading it.
Ooh.
Even the one shot that came out, like A Day to Die or whatever the hell it's called.
Right, yeah. It's got 6 issues in a one shot, and the 6th issue just came out today. So I was able to go through it since, I'm waiting usually on miniseries these days, and I think that has paid off very well. I love Deceased. It is written by Tom Taylor, who also wrote Injustice, and I think it's really cool when you look at him getting taken off the leash to do this kind of Elseworld style stuff in the DC universe. Injustice is the Justice League fighting each other, falling apart, and this is the Justice League working together, falling apart. So really cool situations that he gets to work with and gets to go all out. There's, it's outside of continuity, so he can do whatever he wants. And I'd like to give a shout out to the way he writes Damian Wayne, who is Robin, Black Canary and Green Arrow as a couple, and then Harley and Ivy as a couple, actually. Kind of a spoiler there, sorry, but I was really glad to finally see someone do that well. And the other characters I mentioned, he just excels with these characters in such a way, and it is incredible. So, issue 6 was great. I could even see them moving forward in the Deceased universe since they already did the one shot. But loved obviously what he did on Injustice and loved what he did here. So I would love to see him continue doing outside of continuity work in DC and including Marvel as well. So we'll see there with Tom Taylor, but another home fucking run from him. Criminal by Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips is a really cool comic about thieves, and I really appreciate when kind of like underground fiction goes against just doing mob crime stuff. I like crime stuff that's outside of that, so like Breaking Bad or Criminal being about thieves. Extremely good comic. Highly recommended. Shout out to Rat Queens 19 and Bloodborne 16. Bloodborne, if you're a fan of the game, this is such a cool comic because it's not trying to like tell you a big fucking story or anything like that. It is just being fucking insane like the game, and I really enjoyed what they did.
Like the sound of that?
Yeah, it is just like a comic book about going insane is basically what the Bloodborne comic is, and it's fucking fantastic. It's so cool. Movies, I watched The Nightingale, as we talked about. Not a horror movie like The Babadook, but still really interesting and compelling nonetheless. I won't really get into it because I don't want to spoil anything. It's a very intricately woven drama, but it is very good and certainly worth a watch. Star Wars Attack of the Clones is officially the worst Star Wars movie, and I could not fathom how bad it was. I could not fathom that it was so much worse than I remember. And so now what we're looking at with my rewatch here is I just need to see whether Revenge of the Sith, basically where the quality difference is between Revenge of the Sith and The Last Jedi, because I think that The Last Jedi is a bad movie. I think that it is the worst Star Wars movie outside of the prequels, but there's always a possibility that it could be worse than Revenge of the Sith. I don't think that's going to happen, but we're about to find out. So, confirming once I watch.
At least we can all agree that episode 2 is not great. All of us have that same opinion, right? Hopefully, Dom, are you?
Absolutely.
Are you an episode 2 apologist?
No, I mean,
Dom's okay with the prequels.
Yeah, I really like it. As far as like where it ranks in all of them, it's towards the bottom. Yeah.
Oh, it's dead.
Dom, you got to rewatch the prequels, man. Like, if you're like me, you haven't watched them since you were a kid. Like, it's different than you remember. It's different.
Yeah, I rewatched. It was actually it's not been since just before The Force Awakens, so a couple years ago.
Oh, okay. So that's recent. Yeah.
For me, it's like episode 1 has cool stuff, not great. Episode 3, not great. Episode 2, bad. Out of those three.
I think that's how I would explain kind of the three trilogies of Star Wars, Jared, for me is I think the original trilogy is really cool ideas executed excellently for the most part. I think the prequel trilogy is some really cool ideas executed very poorly for the most part. And I think that the sequel trilogy with Disney is some really cool ideas executed pretty much average, I would say, for the most part. And it's unfortunate that, the most recent stuff is, I would say, the worst stuff of Star Wars. I'm saying like the last 20 years, not The Last Jedi, but
yeah,
it just sucks that like it's been so long since the best Star Wars, so that's where we're at. We'll see how Revenge of the Sith goes this coming week. Monster with Charlize Theron, that's a cool movie. Rewatch Joker with my brother. I feel the same way that I did the first time. I think that I would just echo my original sentiments. Watched through the animated films of Don Bluth, so you guys may be familiar with some of these. Banjo the Woodpile Cat, The Secret of Nim, An American Tale, and The Land Before Time. He still has more for me to go through. Anastasia and All Dogs Go to Heaven, to name a couple. But he's kind of like an anti-Disney guy. He walked out of Disney and took some people with him and was trying to rival Disney in the 80s and 90s. And I'm sure we've heard of some of these movies, but some really cool stuff there, man. Like, I know he has some movies that are much less well regarded later on, but some really cool stuff in these non-Disney, but same quality level movies from the 80s and 90s. Some really great stuff there. So, Secret of Nim might be a fucking masterpiece the more I think about it. Like, that shit is so fucking cool. It's about like animals. It's about anthropomorphic animals on a farm, but NIM is the National Institute for Mental Health, and it's all about like how they were experimented on and like how that turned them into anthropomorphic animals. Sorry, I just spoiled that whole movie. nonetheless, still worth a watch, still a masterpiece. I think you should check it out. Finally, and I won't be too long on this, but man, oh man, I watched Primal, Jared. Season 1, actually part 1 of Primal. I found out they're doing Season 1, Part 2 in 2020. This is Genndy Tartakovsky's latest effort, and he is the creator of Dexter's Laboratory and Samurai Jack, and Star Wars The Clone Wars micro series, which is the 2D animated version, which I love, and greatly improves the prequels. But anyways, Samurai Jack's obviously one of my favorite shows of all time, and after Samurai Jack Season 5 on Adult Swim, moving into Primal, it's kind of a perfect bridge, and I think it's really cool how Primal is taking a lot of stuff from Samurai Jack, how like they used to do the kind of like silent film type of thing where there would be like almost no dialogue throughout an episode of Samurai Jack, and it'd just be sound effects and music, and that is all that Primal is. It's this almost like buddy story between a dinosaur and a caveman, and they're fighting, you know, all these crazy animals or whatever, and there's no dialogue whatsoever. It's all just sound effects and music, and it is gorgeously animated. After watching Don Bluth stuff and being like, why isn't Disney still animating in 2D at all? Why is their last animated film Winnie the Pooh from 2011? Like, that sucks. Like, that is just such a medium kind of lost to time at this point. Hopefully it'll be revived. And going into Primal and seeing that, it's like, wow, maybe we do have a chance. Maybe there is something there. Maybe it is going to be revived, because Genndy Tartakovsky's still doing it, man. He's still out there being an OG in the traditional animation space and killing it. So huge shout out to Primal. Can't wait to see what they do in 2020.
Hell yeah. I actually saw a thing that Disney's actually looking towards going back to 2D animation for stuff on Disney Plus, because having the install base gives them the financial backing to be secure in doing them, you know. So
yeah, it's disappointing that a company as big as them needs that financial incentive to keep hope alive when they're the ones that brought about the dream of that stuff in the first place on a mainstream large scale. So it sucks that that's the case, but you know, at this point it's gotten so sad when it comes to that situation that I'll take it, man. If that's what it takes, you know, Disney launching their own streaming service to finally get their ass in gear, fucking so be it.
It's strange in retrospect, like them acquiring Pixar is one of the worst things that happened to that, because they just lean on Pixar, you know what I mean, to do their stuff, and then they're like, we don't even have to do 2D animation. And
that's the thing, is like Pixar killed traditional animation. Fucking murdered that shit, you know? So that's a whole other conversation, but shout out to Primal and traditional animation.
Shout out. Let's hop into the news here. First off, one thing I didn't include in the news that's not necessarily breaking news, but it was something that came up after I had wrote down all of the news for the show. Sorry, I'm trying to pull up the tweet because it disappeared. Trying to stall for time. Okay, here it is. So, something that came up with Ubisoft. Remember last week we talked about some of their delays that they had for their games? They kind of clarified something here that for the 5 AAA games they're releasing between April 2020 and March 2021, they're all going to be cross-gen. So, this will include, obviously, Watch Dogs Legion, Rainbow Six Quarantine, Gods and Monsters, and 2 other announced games, one of those likely being Assassin's Creed. This is something we assumed that was possible, but the fact that they're kind of confirming that they'll be cross-gen titles kind of takes away any questioning about that and lets us know that they are planning to do that. I think some of them people weren't sure of at launch because of when is Watch Dogs Legion going to launch? It's going to launch before the next-gen consoles, right? So it'll still be cross-gen, but the previous gen one might release before the consoles even come out. So will they do that? They were the ones that did the $10 upgrade, right, for last gen? Where if you bought Assassin's Creed on Xbox 360, you could buy it for Black Flag. You could buy it for $10 on Xbox One, right?
No.
Was it then?
That was Call of Duty. Assassin's Creed had 2 different games. So they had Rogue. Wait. Yes.
No, they
They
did
had
have
one
two
game that was-
games, but I thought they also did the trade-up program because Black Flag came out on last gen.
Right.
I don't think it did. I thought it didn't. Until
I will
after.
bet you every dollar in my savings account.
No. Unity didn't come out on last gen. Unity was part of the 2-game thing.
I'll look it up.
About, Dom. Black Flag was cross-generation.
Really?
Yeah.
Shit.
No
Okay.
need to look
Because I had it on 360 and then I got it on the Xbox One. I was like, oh, so this is where it was meant to be played. Got it.
Okay.
Yeah, it released on PS3, 360, Wii U, PlayStation 4.
Wii U.
Yeah. And it recently released on Switch too, which it probably runs better there than it did on the 360. So yeah, nothing surprising here. Just nice to see that we are going to have some cross-gen titles. And this means that most people, if they hear about this, should probably wait for those games for next gen, because in their report as well, they said that they're optimizing them for next gen. So if you're planning on getting the new console, wait to get those games on the new console as well. Don't waste your money.
Man. I feel like I'm the only one getting hung up on this in the world, but I'm still hung up on it.
On what?
It's just weird to me. So they're gonna put out Assassin's Creed whatever on PS4 and Xbox One, and it's gonna be that game, and then that same disc is gonna work on PS5 and Scarlet, right? But it's gonna look exactly the same.
That's the thing about these cross-gen games is I'm like, isn't everything gonna be cross-gen?
Well, it's harder. It's
No
harder
matter what?
now because of backwards compatibility of like why, right?
Right.
And
Yeah, like, what's the bump is not going to be worth anything. So yeah, why wouldn't you always just buy the PS4 version of Ghost of Tsushima or whatever, and then play it on your PS5? I don't think you're going to get that much of a bump.
Especially now that I'm conditioned that there's a PS4 game, looks one way on base PS4, but in my PS4 Pro,
Right.
the same exact disc looks much better. Now that I'm conditioned that that's just free and it's the same game, it's going to be weird. It's like, I don't know that I want... Certainly you don't buy both.
Well, I'm buying a new console anyways. I'm buying a new console anyway, so I'm just like, if I'm going to spend $60, might as well buy the one that has the... They're both going to be $60, right?
But here's the interesting question that kind
weird.
of Dom just raised, which is like, if they were currently making PS4 games and PS4 Pro versions of those games that cost $10 extra, what would we be buying?
Yeah, that'd be.
I'm not
so
sure
weird.
what I would buy.
Yeah.
And this is all assuming they both cost $60. I'm just going to get the next gen one. I don't know. It's very weird. You bring up a good point with backwards compatibility.
I just can't wait to see how they different publishers do this.
I just think they're just gonna be like, here, we're putting out both versions for $60. Buy whatever one you want. You figure it out. Be confused if you want. Just give us your money. I think honestly that's the way it's gonna be. They could care less if you have confusion as long as they get your money right. So speaking of selling things, PlayStation 4 has now become the second best-selling console of all time in terms of sold in. So remember, this is shipped units, not necessarily sold, but still awesome in its own right, because these are the numbers that PlayStation tracks lifetime as well, are sold in, not necessarily sold through. So it now currently sits at 102.8, which means it passed PlayStation 1 and the Wii, and it's second to only the PS2, which still sits at 155 million units sold in.
Man, that's so crazy. Still,
which is not only
PS2.
It's not only the best-selling console of all time, it's the best-selling video game hardware. Because the way it works now is it's PlayStation 2, number 2 is Nintendo DS, number 3 is Game Boy and Game Boy Color. They merge them together for some reason. And then number 4 is PlayStation 4. So PlayStation 4 is the second best console, but obviously fourth best in terms of any video game hardware.
Portables included, yeah.
So, big ups to them. I remember there was this idiot on this podcast that said one time that like the PS4 was never going to pass 100 million units sold.
You like a month ago.
It wasn't a month ago. No, it was like a year and a half ago.
Okay, it was a long time ago.
Remember what his friend said on that at that
There's
point?
no way it doesn't pass 100 million, you idiot.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. You guys didn't say idiot, but yeah, pretty much same sentiment.
But we all said it definitely wouldn't pass PS2. There's just no way.
Oh
It's not
yeah,
possible.
I don't think any video game console will ever, unless there's some weird future where like Sony and Microsoft merge to release one specific console and everyone has to buy that console, right? I think that's maybe...
Even then, that's like I don't know, because you got to assume like a good portion of people are both, Yeah. So then they're just only buying one. So I don't know that your numbers go up that much, right?
Well, no, but the crazy thing is, even if you combine total PlayStation 4 and Xbox One sales, it doesn't equal 155.
Yeah, exactly my point.
Yeah. So, Next up, this is something that is good not only for video games but for athletes in general. The NCAA unanimously, seemingly out of nowhere, voted in favor of allowing collegiate athletes the opportunity to license out their names, images, and likenesses. So basically, they can earn money off of playing collegiate sports. These athletes bring in millions of dollars to these universities, and they never really get anything outside of it. I mean, they get a full-ride scholarship, don't be wrong, but they also don't get anything from playing on these sports teams and basically putting their bodies on the line for these universities. And this is kind of ushered in the possibility for the return of college sports games. If you remember, EA used to make college basketball. They used to make NCAA football, which in my opinion is leagues and shoulders above any Madden game ever. The NCAA games are just so much better.
I think you combined a couple things there.
Leagues and shoulders. Yeah, leagues and shoulders. League, shoulders, head and toes.
So, Jerrad, I got a little bit on this. I was listening to some Mike Golick this morning. I forget what his show is called, but I like that guy.
Mike and Mike.
It used to be Mike and Mike, but he does it with his son now. It's Mike and something. Yeah.
Something.
Yeah. Mike and Lil Mike.
They had, I don't know if it was a guest or who it was. They had someone else on who basically was trying to dig deeper into the legality of what exactly was going on. And so there's a couple states, specifically California already passed it.
Yep.
And two in North Carolina, I think, and Florida have bills, in the process of being passed that basically override anything the NCAA can do and basically say, no, these players can do this regardless of the NCAA rules, right? But what the NCAA voted that you just said was on these players are allowed to make money on their likeness within the collegiate framework.
Yeah. So
it's some phrase like that, which could mean literally anything, but most likely it doesn't mean shit as far as what we assume it to mean. It might mean the collegiate framework might be like, only within profit of $100 a year or something where it's basically negligible, right? But that doesn't, that's not going to stop all these states from passing these laws if they choose to, right? So potentially this NCAA decision was just trying to appease some states from passing certain bills, but I don't think it's the full thing we want yet.
Well,
I think it's coming.
I think this is a middle ground thing of them basically protecting themselves if that does end up happening, right, where almost all states do it. Because they even threatened California saying that, well, if you guys are going to pass that, then no college in the state of California can compete in a championship. That's what their thing was in response to California passing that bill was, okay, you guys can pay your athletes, but none of your teams are eligible for any championships moving forward in the NCAA. So, but then they passed this. We'll see what happens.
And they can potentially sue anyway and say your law is actually unconstitutional on the federal level. It'd be a whole fun mess to watch play out. I'm really excited.
Yeah, I mean, the money the NCAA has, I don't know if it'd necessarily be in favor of California, but with this passing, I don't think they're planning on that. I think that was an empty threat. I think they were hoping that more states wouldn't follow and that they're seeing that. I think they had to come together. The fact that it was a unanimous vote means that there's something else going on behind the scenes. That's odd that they were so against it. They say, oh, no, let's vote unanimously, and there's that vague language. I'm not fully behind being that pessimistic, but I wouldn't doubt that happening in terms of it being that type of language for that case, but who knows. Next up, Death Stranding will be releasing in summer 2020 on PC, published by 505 Games, and a bunch of Sony fanboys are pissed off. That's pretty much a news story there. Yeah, a bunch of people got mad on Twitter because the game's coming out on PC almost a year later.
Which we already knew. We just didn't know when.
Yeah.
And who was publishing it, I guess. But I'm pretty sure it was already known.
It was rumored.
Subtly.
It was rumored that it was coming to PC. Pretty much confirmed. You're right. But it wasn't official. This is official.
Right, yeah.
And it's one of those weird things where Sony fanboys where there was always this argument with them recently of all Microsoft first-party games come out on PC, so they're not even exclusive. So when this happens at Death Stranding, it's a blow to their dumb argument, I guess, and a bunch of people were pissed off on Twitter because...
I don't know. This has been a story 3 fucking times now, and I'm tired of getting online and see people going, Death Stranding is coming to PC every 3 fucking months. It's not a new story.
Well, yeah, it is, because this is the first time it's confirmed.
I know it's been rumored. But the last time it was rumored, it was on a Sony website, and they took it down. We know the fucking game's coming to PC. Stop making it a headline.
Well, I think 505 Games publishing it is odd, too. It's a weird publishing partner.
That's a weird headline.
the big news story there is that 505 Games, the last game they published on PC was Epic Store exclusive. So that's why people are kind of worried, is that when Death Stranding comes to PC, it'll be an Epic Store exclusive. So,
oh God, the horror!
I swear to God.
Downloading a separate client, that whole argument, man.
Months,
God damn it.
If I wake up in 4 months and hop on my computer and it's like, by the way, Death Stranding's coming to PC on the Epic Games Store. If this is another story,
it will 100%. 100%.
God, I just don't want to hear any more about Death Stranding.
Gamers outraged Death Stranding exclusive to Epic Games.
Because Jordan, even if it's not an Epic exclusive, if it does come to Steam, that's also going to be a story. Just sort of prepare yourself.
Yeah, it doesn't come to Epic Games Store. Yeah.
Right. Either way or both.
And then
it'll be a story.
It's going to have a fucking Game of the Year edition. Game of the Year edition coming to PC. I don't fucking care.
I'm interested to see the reviews for that game. I think it could range all across the board. Nothing lower than maybe like a 6.5, but I'm very interested to see where it lands with people. Next up, Call of Duty. We have some sales numbers. It hit a 608 million sell-through in 3 days. And if you're wondering, is the Call of Duty franchise slumping? This was their biggest opening for the franchise this generation. So it's the best-selling Call of Duty since PS4 and Xbox One have released, making crazy amounts of money. The only games to make more money in that span of 3 days at this generation are GTA 5 and Red Dead Redemption 2. So Rockstar has one game that finally competes, because it always does.
Man, that's crazy, because that version of GTA 5 was a re-release, and it still was that good, sales-wise.
Yeah.
Crazy.
But we count GTA sales as one entity, right?
Well, it's since 2013, and didn't GTA 5 come out in 2013 on last gen?
I think it came out. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it did.
Okay.
It does count both, I'm pretty sure. Still, really impressive. Modern Warfare is, a sub-franchise that people have been yearning for since MW3. It's my personal sub-franchise of the Call of Duties. I'm not really a Black Ops guy. So I think a lot of people are hopping back in, and it's pretty good. The only there's no loot box controversy with this game. Hopefully in a month there's not.
Yet.
The only controversy with it is they changed a mission in the game that's based on a real world mission for the enemies to be Russians instead of Americans, and people are mad that it's American propaganda. I'm like, it's a war game developed in the United States. You don't think it's going to be pro-USA? I don't know. It's just a weird non-story to me.
Yeah.
I'm like, you don't expect that to happen? I don't know. Anyways, let's hop into all this EA news. Some good stuff, some bad stuff, some we'll see what happens stuff. Pretty much as it goes for Electronic Arts. So this is via their fiscal investor call that they have every quarterly report that they do. They end up having to call their investors and let them know what's going down for the future. This one is particularly interesting because with the next generation on the horizon, they actually jumped into a lot of that stuff, discussing their plans going into PS5 and Xbox 2, or whatever they plan to call it, Project Scarlet. So I'm going to hit through these things. If you want to talk about something specifically, just shout it out. In a recent investor call, EA sheds light on their plans for the coming year with next-generation consoles on the horizon. Here's everything worth note. First, 50% of their full game sales on PS4 and Xbox One over the last 12 months were digital. It's really good. Obviously, we know we're headed towards the digital future.
Big one.
Yep, 50% of their games being sold digitally. And obviously, EA is a huge publisher, so that's pretty important. Next up, with the release, this wasn't in the investor call necessarily. There were bits and parts of it. But with the release of Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, EA will return to Steam and release their games on Valve's platform. This also includes EA Access. That's coming to Steam as well. And it's going against their own exclusivity for Origin, which is their own PC client where they were selling games exclusively. Not a surprise. They want that Star Wars game to sell. I think that shows that Origin probably isn't as successful or worth it to them, right? So it's like, let's just put all of our games back on Steam. There's no point not to. So there's that.
And I kind of don't like it. It kind of gives power to all the hardcore Steam people that are all upset about Epic. Like, oh man, even EA, has to put their games on our platform because we won't move. We won't buy it on Origin, so we force them to bring it back. It feels like it's just giving them tip,
My only argument is Epic Game Store functions pretty well. Obviously, it's missing some features people don't want, but it functions well. Origin is kind of buggy still. I've used it here and there for NDA tests and other stuff, and it just doesn't work super well, especially for like a publisher like EA where you expect it to be running well if they expect to make money. I do agree with you. This is another kick in the bucket of like, see, they're moving back to Steam. Epic, just stop doing what you're doing. Yeah.
I don't know.
Speaking of stopping what you're doing, NBA Live 20 was canceled. And if you're like, hey, hasn't that series been canceled before? Yeah, this is the fourth time this generation the franchise has canceled the game.
Fourth time this generation.
Fourth time in 7 years-ish? 6-7 years?
So how many games have they released this generation?
3 or 4. 3? Yeah, it's not been great. There's the one with Joel Embiid. There's the one with Russell Westbrook. I can't remember the other one. So they basically stated, we're taking our time to get it right. The focus will be on next gen. So we're assuming that they're going to be releasing this either next year or the year after. They just haven't been able to compete with NBA 2K. And obviously this always sparks the question of, if they didn't have the exclusivity license on the NFL, would they lose out to a 2K football game, right? People always bring up that argument. So it's just a shame to see this game canceled once again because, like we always talk about, competition is best for things because it sparks innovation, and that's a huge argument against Madden where they haven't really innovated that much year to year, whereas with 2K, NBA Live keeps trying to claw at them and they just can't surpass them, even with all of the microtransactions issues the 2K series has had in the last couple of years. So there's that.
It's funny how capitalism finds a way to somehow make itself anti-capitalism. That sounds weird, but you know what I mean.
Like, yeah. Battlefield. Wondering where Battlefield's been. The next Battlefield game will ship between April 2021 and March 2022. This wasn't mentioned, but I wrote this in, so likely holiday 2021, because Battlefield usually releases in the holiday. This is giving, obviously, Battlefield, the franchise, a lot of time to breathe, and I don't think they want to usher in a cross-gen title and it be meh, because Battlefield 5 released and sold meh. So it looks like they're going to be taking their time to release a good Battlefield game, whether that's a mainline entry or Bad Company or something else that they are veering towards, who knows, but don't expect Battlefield anytime soon, at least not in 2020. Next up, Apex Legends, which is a game I love. It's currently a GOTY contender for me. They announced it has surpassed 70 million players live to date, so obviously this isn't concurrent. That means that 70 million players have played Apex Legends, which is still pretty impressive. And they said with Battlefield being on hiatus till 2021, Apex Legends will be their primary shooter focus for 2020. They're still looking to release it on mobile, and they haven't released it in China either. So they're going to get big boosts from both of those markets. It's impressive that they've already hit 70 million. They talked about how free-to-play is really good for that game and how it's led to a lot of success. So I'm excited for them to focus on it next year. I hope that doesn't come with any negatives in terms of focus of like, this is our main shooter, let's stuff it with as many microtransactions as we can. Hopefully that's not the case. But we'll see. Speaking of sports titles, we mentioned earlier we were talking about NBA Live. Between April 2020 and March 2021, they're going to add one more sports title to the annual slate. Now, people saw this and they immediately thought, because of the NCAA news, oh my God, NCAA football is coming out in 2021. Sadly, EA responded to the NCAA stuff and said, hey, we're looking into it, but the earliest you'll even hear about a game if we end up making one will be 2021. So I personally wouldn't expect to hear about a game then, but who knows, we'll see. And
you think this is just them like annualizing UFC?
No, because this is on top of. This is an additional sports franchise. So it's either something they haven't released in a long time, like cricket, or obviously NCAA football, or it's a brand new franchise for like snowboarding or skateboarding or something. And like I said, it's going to be releasing between April 2020 and March 2021. So with NCAA football, there's no way an NCAA football game with the news today is going to come out next fall, right? It's not happening. Yeah. In addition to that, in that same time period, Medal of Honor VR is coming out, 2 unannounced third-party partnership titles, which could potentially be EA Originals or something else. And lastly, this is the thing that got me excited. Some exciting remasters of fan favorites. Now, boys, I want, obviously, Mass Effect Trilogy Remaster. Obviously. But the disservice they did to Visceral, they also better give us some Dead Space love.
Dude. Oh, man.
I feel like that's just an excuse to not release a Dead Space or a Skate game. We're going to remaster them. There you go, kids.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take them if that's all we're going to get. You know what I mean?
But, it could be, Jordan, the bright side could be like, maybe that's it, just so they're testing, you know, the popularity, the viability with just a remaster because it's cheaper to do, right? And then if that blows the doors off, then they're like, okay, yeah, we'll make a full-on sequel now. We see that it's still, the market will still pay for it, right? So hopefully that's how that goes.
I think we have to thank Activision for this, unfortunately, in a weird backwards way because of Spyro and Crash. Those games both sold really well, and Activision said that this could lead to future entries in the series, right? And I don't think those games, they sold very well for what they are, but I think a Mass Effect remaster and a Dead Space remaster, Dead Space not so much because that obviously is kind of a niche in terms of it being horror, but those games could sell very well if the remasters are done right and have some love put behind them. So that's the thing, man. We talked about Blue Point and we're like, what are they remaking? And obviously there's all these rumors of Demon Souls. It would be a true mark of them wanting it to be done with care and love and attention if EA hired Blue Point to do the Mass Effect remaster.
And Blue Point did say the only hint they gave us, right, was it's big.
Yeah.
Which,
well,
I mean,
I think their next thing has got to be a remake. If their next thing is big and they're coming off of Shadow of the Colossus remake, I don't think they're doing a simple remaster. I think they're doing a full-up remake.
The full quote for this was some exciting remasters / remakes of beloved franchises.
Yeah, but I don't think... Is Mass Effect in need of a full remake or just a remaster?
One is.
You know, like,
I think one is for modern standards.
Dude, no way. I just played that game a couple of years ago and loved it. I don't think it's nearly as clunky as people say.
At least with the remaster, they need to fix those elevator load times. I love Mass Effect 1, but there are some things they need to fix.
You're talking about remaking from the ground up a game from the last generation. The Crash and Spyro remakes are from like 3 gens ago. So that's when you need to remake a game, in my opinion, is when the technology has changed so much that it's going to fundamentally change in a really good way the way that you experience the game. And
I hear what you're saying. Like
necessarily the mechanics.
The things they could fix with a remake wouldn't necessarily justify the budget of one because it won't change it as drastically because it isn't as old. I really understand. That's a good point. That leans me more towards remaster than remake. What were you going to say, Dom?
Dude, if anything happens with Mass Effect, it's going to be a remaster, I guarantee you. Because even if they redid the trilogy, that's the thing, is like, if you're going to do one, you're going to have to remake the whole trilogy, and then that gets into the whole, like, it's already a controversial trilogy, and you've had all this Andromeda controversy, and that's got to be tough for them. It's not.
That's
like
what I was gonna ask.
Going back and remaking your favorite thing, like that Mass Effect trilogy has a lot of stuff embroiled in it.
People still
that's what I was
buy
gonna
it like
ask
hotcakes,
like,
though.
Sure, yeah.
Do you think there's a possibility of, Mass Effect 1 gets remade from the ground up, obviously then sold on its own, probably $60, of course, right? This is still EA we're talking about, and then that's it. That's all we know. And then later on, 2 and 3 are just remasters. I
think that's a difference in argument, right? Because I think me and Jordan are both assuming it'd be a package deal, right? The trilogy. If it's if they're packaged together, remaster all the way. I don't think they'd even have time to remake all 3 games. If they release them piecemeal, Final Fantasy VII style, obviously it's different because it's one game being split, but same kind of thing. I think that there's more potential there for a remake. Exactly. Interesting. We'll see. Next up, where did I leave off? Fan favorite. Okay. Future plans. So this is stuff a little bit farther out, 2022 onward. Here are some of the future plans they mentioned. Moda's working on a new IP. Obviously, we thought we were working on a Star Wars game. We'll get to that a little later. But yeah, so new IP for Motive is expected. New EA Sports titles, which you kind of already know because they said they want to add one next year. And probably NCAA football if that comes around to it as well. More EA originals. They said they want to double down on that as well. We heard about the 2 unannounced third-party partnerships that could be EA originals. And they also said there's currently projects in development at DICE. We assume that's Battlefield, which they already mentioned. Bioware, which we'll get into. Maxis, which is, I think, working on the Command & Conquer remaster. And Criterion, who we haven't heard from them, correct me if I'm wrong, Jordan, since that, like, off-road sports game, right? It was like an off-road, like...
aerial combat in Battlefront 2, Jerrad.
But didn't they already announce that, like, four-wheeler, like, off-road game? Like,
right,
ATV?
So they had this, like, all-terrain kind of racer driving game that was very early in development, way before it should have ever been shown at EA's E3 maybe 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
That was canceled, and then they were relegated to working on a piece of the multiplayer for Battlefront 2, and it's really sad, man, because, you know, Ghost is, like, broken off and gone to do the Need for Speed franchise, and it would be great to see them, Criterion, whoever's left there from the old days, I guess, go back and do a Burnout game, but who knows.
And the last 2 things. So a new Star Wars title's in development, and it'll release before April 2022. We assume this might be Motive's game. Interesting tidbit here. If you listen to the Kind of Funny Games Daily, on the day that we're recording this, October 30th, Gary Whitta, the writer of Rogue One, and I think he was a story consultant on Walking Dead, Telltale as well, he actually hinted at this Star Wars game. Who's to say if he had any consultation with it or whatever, but he basically talked about this too, of knowing about it.
Now, hasn't there been a Star Wars game canceled since Visceral's game?
Visceral's game, Motive's game, Respawn's game.
I don't think so. That sounds about
I
it.
think it was just Visceral's game. It was Amy Hennig's game, yeah.
But I think we just didn't know much about Motive at all. If it was just shrouded.
The thing with Motive is that Jade Raymond left to Google Stadia. But I don't think another one was canceled. And EA announced that this game's coming out. So were you asking in terms of, is this the game that got canceled, or?
No, I was just trying to remember. I could have sworn there's another one canceled since Visceral.
Not that I'm thinking of.
Yeah,
while you're looking that up, the last thing, they announced that Dragon Age 4 is in development, but don't expect it until after April 2022.
Whew.
To me, this is BioWare's last attempt at not disappearing into the ether and EA not cutting bait with them and shutting them down. One thing that was mentioned today also on Kind of Funny Games Daily by a reader that I didn't even think about is Alberta, Canada is losing its video game tax. And if you're unfamiliar, basically these video game taxes or taxes for certain types of businesses help businesses come to these cities because they get tax breaks, and it incentivizes new business for the economy in certain locations. Basically, Canada wants to diversify a lot of their business structure, so they shut down the video game tax in a number of provinces in Canada. So BioWare also might not be long for this world if they stay in Canada as well. So, as well as other Canadian video game developers who kind of rely on those taxes. So, Jordan, any update in terms of, did you find out if there was another game canceled?
Project Orca. So I'm not sure. This has something to do with Amy Hennig's Visceral game. Project Ragtag.
Yeah.
Was Amy Hennig's game. I think they might have canceled the game that Visceral's game turned into. Does that make sense? They
Yeah,
makes
that's
sense.
what it is. That's what it is, because they shut down
makes
Visceral. That game technically wasn't canceled, but they took
Yeah.
all of the parts of Ragtag and were trying to assemble it into
Jared.
something else.
They canceled the game twice, is what they
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
Damn, that's brutal.
Well, they canceled, destroyed that developer, sent everyone away.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to use all your work and try to put into something else. Just kidding, we're not. So there's that. A lot of interesting news. Sucks Dragon Age 4 is still so far away. Hopefully we get, like we talked about earlier, Starfield before that. I'm obviously, launch of consoles is never really great. At least we're gonna have Halo Infinite, which I'm excited to see how that lands. But I'm curious to see if it's gonna match the normal pattern of we have to wait maybe 2.5 to 3 years into a console's life cycle to start getting some of the bigger franchises to land on it with the install base, or if we're gonna see them maybe a little bit earlier because of backwards compatibility and trying to get in there as early as you can. So we'll see what happens.
I just gotta say, what the fuck were they doing with this game that got canceled twice? Like Project Ragtag that got turned into Project Orca. Like, what the fuck were you guys doing, EA? God damn.
I think there's a good explanation for that, because all the Ragtag stuff
There better
was
be.
leaked, right? Well, it was all leaked, right? Like
Sure.
Schreier had the in or whatever and got a bunch of info, and that was all stuff we were never supposed to know about. We knew that Amy Hennig was working on a game. I think that was official, but
Right.
and we were gonna find out it got canceled when she left in some form, probably. But it was also
Are you saying
leaked.
that Jason Schreier's article affected Project Orca?
No.
I would
No.
say yes.
I'm just saying. Well, I mean, maybe,
You
but
think so?
I'm just saying part of the details of his article was that the parts of what remained was going to try to be reutilized for a new game, right? That was never going to be public information, and who knows to the extent of what.
No.
that
They
ever really
said that
was.
as soon as they killed Visceral. They said, hey, we killed Visceral, but we're going to let some other people work on their game. It's okay.
So was that like an officially released detail?
Yeah.
from EA?
Yeah, they told us that Tiburon, which used to work on Madden, right?
Yeah.
They, up in Canada, were going to work on it with somebody else, maybe? With Motive or something like that? They were gonna. It was gonna be an EA like tandem project essentially, but that
Then my theory is
Project
shot, so
Orca.
never mind.
They didn't tell us. It was called Project Orca, obviously, but yeah, they told us that we're salvaging this game, and I just it's such a clusterfuck with EA and Star Wars video games. But
My big thing is that I hope with the success of Apex Legends and hopefully the success with Jedi Fallen Order, that EA sees that, like, hey, maybe not cramming all of your developers into making games on the Frostbite engine is a good thing. But maybe let them use different engines.
it is very interesting that Respawn has had a lot of success with their games under EA, and they are the one studio that wasn't forced to use Frostbite.
Well, and
I don't know, Jared.
when they got purchased, Vincent Pella asked for a chair on the board of directors at EA. So, like, he has some pull there.
I don't know, Jared. I feel like maybe part of me, maybe 20% of me, almost wants Jedi Fallen Order. Now, hear me out. This is going to sound bad. But as a Detroit Lions fan, there comes a point in the season where you're like, nope, fuck it. I want them to tank this season. So that way we can at least start fresh, get a good draft pick, and so on, right?
Yeah.
So some small part of me wants Jedi Fallen Order to tank, to do the opposite, to show Disney that EA cannot handle this, and then they open up to other developers and end this exclusivity, right? And then maybe that ends like in a longer term better Star Wars games just by sacrificing one more to the wolves, right? That
It's
sounds
interesting
bad,
to see if Disney
but-
isn't already at that point, though, no matter how Fallen Order does.
Right.
Yeah.
That's also a good point. It might not matter how well, but
Yeah.
I feel like if it does well enough, then there's a chance that EA gets, another term of exclusivity with Disney.
And also remember, we're getting another Star Wars game before 2022, before the deal ends, from somebody who's not Respawn. So you still have your golden egg there of maybe they'll be the ones to screw it up for you.
Any way that deal gets renewed?
Yes.
Yeah.
I can't stand the thought of that, man. I just can't. I need a
Me either,
Ubisoft
but
Star Wars
it's
game.
possible.
The thing that sucks is John Drake came over from Sony to Disney for their video game series, but he specifically the Star Wars branch of it and the Marvel branch of it, which Marvel branch doesn't even be touched, obviously. but like he doesn't have any say in either of those. He has say in all of the other Disney properties.
Marvel has the Spider-Man game, but people are like in love with Bill Roseman for whatever reason, but like Marvel games still is mostly just like Future Fight on mobile and shit like that. You know, it's like Ultimate Alliance 3, but like we really don't have a lot of like Arkham Asylum level games. It's not like we have a Spider-Man trilogy and now Avengers is coming out.
Well, it started 2 years ago.
I don't even know if Avengers is going to be. Well, it's a big turnaround, that's for sure. It's much better. I would much rather Star Wars be in a place like this, but we still don't know how Avengers is going to turn out. So they are in a better space than the Star Wars games, but I'm still not convinced that they are just going to continuously knock them out of the park like Spidey.
Yeah, I'm just going based on what we currently have, you know? I'm not future projecting because you're right. It could totally crash and burn. But as it currently sits...
Avengers will show us a lot about Marvel games.
But if it's not that great, or if it's, if it's absolutely dog shit, I kind of doubt it. But if that's the case, if it's a Battlefront 2, then, Disney can be like, well, Crystal Enix, you're not making another Star Wars game. Or, Avengers game.
Exactly. That'd be the end of it. A different studio.
Right.
Yeah, which, helps with the not having exclusivity. That's been the show. Talked for quite a bit about a lot of interesting things. I like that conversation about perspectives on, shooting mechanics and all that stuff. It was really good. Came out of nowhere, which are the best conversations. The ones that aren't planned necessarily. Yeah. Thank you guys for listening to episode 164. Before we get into what we're going to be playing... before we get into the ending, in terms of what we're going to be playing, completely screw that up. More Outer Worlds. Turns out I found out that the Modern Warfare campaign is a lot shorter than I thought, so I should be able to finish. I think it's only 6 hours on like normal difficulty, which some people are pissed off about. I'm not. I didn't buy it specifically for only the campaign. If I did, I guess I'd be upset about that. But it's all about value. We've had that discussion before. Anyways, looking to finish that as well. Update on Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair. That name's pretty fitting because that last level is insane. If you do yourself a favor, go and watch the final level of Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair. It is hard. I've gotten 70% through the level, and basically through the whole game you're collecting the bees. Remember I told you guys about those? Well, it turns out in the Impossible Lair, every bee you collected throughout the game is a hit you can take. So I have 38 of the bees. And I can take 38 hits in the game.
Fuck. That is always a bad idea, because if someone wasn't aware that they were required to do that, they might only have 2 or 3 bees, because they were like, oh, that's extra. I just want to do the main stuff.
Yeah. The thing is, though, this game isn't super story-focused. I don't feel any worse for not finishing the final level. It tells you from the beginning of the game that it's going to be a challenge. It just doesn't spring out of nowhere, right? So, I don't think I'll quote-unquote finish the game. But I had a blast with it. I'll probably go back and collect more of the collectibles. But boy, howdy, is that final level. Perfect name. The Impossible Lair is right. I do say that knocks it a little bit in terms of being a great game for me. I was thinking of it through my playthrough, it being like a solid 9. I think now I'm sitting more of like in the mid-8s a little bit. I think that's something I want them to improve with the next game. But still enjoyed my time with it. That's pretty much it for me. What about you guys?
Outer Worlds.
Hell yeah. Jordan?
By the way, I just want to commend both of you gentlemen, because you haven't been babbling back and forth between Outer Wilds, Outer Worlds, Outer Wilds, Outer Worlds. It's not that fucking difficult. And you guys
agree
are
1,000%.
Don't hold your breath. I will mess up that. Maybe not all the time, but I will mess it up.
No, you'll mess it up, but like you guys, I'm not noticing it, whereas other podcasts around the globe, it's like, Jesus Christ, they're different games and they're different names. I get that they're similar and they came out around the same time, but it's one of those like, yeah, it's so funny. It's so fun. It's so funny. It's so funny, guys. Yeah, Outer Wilds, when you're talking about Outer Worlds, it's so funny. So I'm glad you guys aren't doing that.
That sounded harsh, but I really do agree with you. It's not that hard to get it right.
Yeah.
In terms of what you're going to be playing.
With that being said, so definitely going to be checking out Revenge of the Sith, Star Wars Episode 3. And I think this is like my real first complete rewatch of the prequel trilogy. I watched a fan edit a few years ago, but this is me, sitting down and going through the movies. And some stuff is worse than people say. Some stuff is not as bad as people say, but they are bad movies. So that is unfortunate. But Revenge of the Sith. Let's see. I've got to check out that Ghost in the Shell standalone complex movie. I'm not going to be checking out Terminator Dark Fate. I think I'm going to wait on that until it comes out. And it'll be out at home in 2 months. So it's like, it's a, 75 on Metacritic, and I'm not like the biggest Terminator fan. Why make a big hullabaloo? So there's that. What else? Oh, reading more Criminal, dude. That is such a good fucking comic book, man. I'm digging that shit hardcore and can't recommend it enough. So definitely some more Criminal. And probably another Don Bluth animated film such as All Dogs Go to Heaven. Are you guys familiar with this film?
Childhood favorite.
Never seen it.
Me too. Don Bluth kind of had he split off from Disney, and then he was able to do kind of some darker stuff, even though Disney has its own dark side, right? But some darker stuff that wasn't so, Disney-fied, basically. So All Dogs Go to Heaven is definitely like that because it deals with heaven and hell and these dogs trying to navigate that. So childhood favorite, as Jerrad said, and I can't wait to rewatch it. Some high-quality shit, these Don Bluth films. I know there's stinkers out there, but he has greats. He has even masterpieces and stuff like Secret of Nim. So shout out to that.
Before I get into the little rigmarole, 2 last things I want to mention. If you're planning on picking up Pokemon Sword or Shield, as of October 30th, you can currently pre-download them. So that's great.
Thank you, Jerrad, for saying that, because I was complaining about that to you last week.
Another thing, something for people who like physical stuff but like their games digital, you can actually buy the digital version of Sword or Shield and get an empty tin for it, if you like that.
People love to shit on that sort of thing, but I'd be all over that.
My only complaint is that you can't use the voucher for that specific version. You
Which is a bummer.
You can, and they're the same price. They're both $60.
It's kind of like the opposite of when they do a collector's edition and they don't have the game in it.
Yeah. I just got the regular version, pre-downloaded Sword. Can't wait. In terms of the rolling out, next week going to be normal podcast, and just for those wondering, in December we pre-record our podcast so we can be away for the holidays. So don't expect anything like pertinent to the news happening. It's mostly going to be evergreen stuff, just to give you a heads up. Thank you guys for listening. If you can, please follow us on iTunes. Leave us a review. It helps with the algorithm to move up in the charts so people can see us. Click on our little icon and listen to us talk about the shooting mechanics in Fallout. And what was the thing you just went on a rant on a little while ago? Before you said what you're going to be playing.
There's multiple things that I went on rants about.
Outer Worlds,
why
Wilds.
people keep talking about
Outer Worlds,
Death
Outer
Stranding
Wilds
coming to PC.
Yeah. If you go to YouTube and search Controlled Interest, we'll pop up there as well. Subscribe, hit the bell notification so you know when we upload, because YouTube subscription boxes can be fickle. I actually found out recently that YouTube somehow unsubscribed me from like 3 of my favorite channels on YouTube, and I had to go back and resubscribe to them, so that kind of was unfortunate.
Jesus Christ, dude, it's a fucking mess, man.
Yeah.
You can tell, you can just see that people are not getting the views that they used to, and it's just awful. Okay, Kind of Funny Games Daily gets recommended to me all the fucking time. I don't interact with the show, podcast form or video, and yet the KFAFs, the Kind of Funny podcasts, the in review shows that they all do on Kind of Funny Prime, none of that shows up in my feed, and I'm subscribed to both channels. Yeah. I watch all that other shit that they don't show me, and then the thing that I don't watch, they show me every fucking day.
Yeah. What was the last thing? Oh, Twitter. If you go to Twitter, search @CTRLINT, that's Controlled Interest abbreviated. Tweet out all of the videos and all of that stuff. You can follow Dom personally at Dom's Oreos. You can follow Jordan at Mellow Modus, and you can follow me at Jerrad_. Once again, still working on it. We'll catch you guys next week. See you then. Bye.